everyone, I'm Dawn. Welcome to my channel. Thank you for visiting with me today. This is the fifth part of my 50 scary movies you may or may have heard of, or 50 lesser known heard of movies that I think you should see. It's my 50. I've been changing the name with every video I've made in this series, but we'll have the final name decided when the videos get posted, which should be soon. So anyway, this is part 5, so we're going through the last 10. So here we go. So what I do is I say the position of the movie, the name of it, and what movie in Shot Till You Drop's list I replaced on that, in that spot on the list. Okay, so 10. Now this one is kind of, well, I was going to say interesting. I don't know if that is the word for it. But I had seen this movie a long time ago. And then maybe 10 years ago, it popped up somewhere on television or something. And I watched it again. Then I didn't remember. I couldn't remember the... There's some electrical woogaboos going on around here. But anyway, I couldn't remember the name of it. And because it was like one of those obscure horror movies, no one had heard of it. I even posted on Twitter, hey, this movie has this, this, this. And they're like, I don't know. And so I did 80 slasher searches. I thought it was an Australian movie. It wasn't. And that, I probably would have found it a lot faster if I just let that part go. I really thought it was Australian, but it wasn't. It's called Death Screams, and it's a 1982 film, and it replaces Audition on my list. The reason it replaces Audition is because Audition, in my opinion, is a huge film, and I don't really think it's horror. It might be horror to men, just like Hard Candy, but... But so Death Screams it's poorly acted. It has terrible camera work. It has a horrible script. It's very predictable. So what is there to like about it? I don't know. It just stood out to me for some reason. And sometimes that's the answer. Sometimes the answer is, I don't know. I don't know. I just do. I would recommend it as an 80s slasher, lesser known film. Because none of them are Oscar worthy. So yeah, it's just, and I think it deserves to be on this list because of me thinking back on it and trying to figure out the name of it. And, that I would put work into finding the name of it. It says something that it came back to me like that, And then I found it on YouTube and watched it there. But anyway, it's called Death Screams, and it's in kind of a low rent, way lesser known 80s slasher. Next on my list is Happy Birthday to Me, 1981, and that replaces Let the Right One In. Happy Birthday to Me, it just brings back those 80s slasher memories. And I really can't believe there hasn't been a remake of that yet. Or has there? I don't think there has been. But, Laura Ingalls' older sister is in it. And I just, there's one scene towards the end where you see a knife. And we had that exact same knife. It may have not been exactly the same, like not the same brand or whatever. But it was the same kind of fillet knife. We had that knife. So, but... anyway, it's not like, again, it's not groundbreaking, it's not Oscar worthy, but it just brings back those fun Halloween time memories to me, and sometimes that's all a movie needs to be. It doesn't have to be, Schindler's List. You know what I mean? So next on my list is Night of the Comet from 1984. It replaces Reanimator on my list. Again, I think Reanimator is just an extremely popular movie for what it is nowadays. So I don't know, but we'll return to Reanimator later. Reanimator later. Okay, so Night of the Comet is just another one of those fun, movies that I remember. Like, my favorite part is when they're in the mall and it's like a trying on stuff, the makeover, not a makeover montage, but where they're playing a fun song and the two teenage girls are just trying on things in the empty department store because everyone is dead, that kind of thing. But Night of the Comet really brings back memories of my dad. That was one of a few movies me and my dad watched every time it came on together, no matter what. We dropped everything to watch that movie. And it's not like, again, it's not a blockbuster. It's not groundbreaking, but it's a fun movie. And it's scary, but it's also funny. It's silly. It's ridiculous. And I really like it. I think Night of the Comet is really a super fun movie. There's another movie me and my dad would watch together. And I may have mentioned this in an earlier video in this series, but it's a movie called Gargoyles with, I want to say Jennifer Salt is in it. Terrible. The gargoyles have scales, feathers, and fur. Like, what are they? But it's still fun. My dad would yell up, "Dawn, Gargoyles is on. Come watch it with your father." My dad talked like Aunt Leona. If you don't know who Aunt Leona is, search through my content. You'll find Aunt Leona. All right. Next on my list is a movie called Something Wicked This Way Comes, based on the Ray Bradbury story. And that's from 1983, and it replaces Wishmaster. I remember being 13 years old watching the trailer for this movie, and to me, the trailer was incredibly scary. And then we would see it was a Disney movie. Like, how could this be a Disney movie? It looks terrifying. But I loved that movie. The book, I really feel like the book kind of just, they did too much. Like, you're doing too much, Ray Bradbury. And I mean, they do get a little extra with the movie too, but it's a movie. And it's just eerie. And, anything with a carnival or a circus or something like that in it is really, that's going to grab my attention. So it's what one might call carnival horror. Carnival horror. Could be a subgenre I just made up. I don't know. That may already be a subgenre. I don't know. And I state that replaces Wishmaster in that position. And next is a movie called After Midnight from 1989 that replaces The Descent in that position. After Midnight is an anthology movie. These college students go to their weird new professor's house who's trying to teach them about fear, and they share scary stories. And, it's there's 3 or 4 different segments or, little short stories throughout it. And it's not bad. It's for what it is. Excuse me. It's, schlocky 80s horror, really. But I thought it was, it's another fun 80s movie, but that was super late 80s, 1989, but I liked it. I watched it again not too long ago, and it didn't quite hit the same way it did when I watched it in like the early 90s, but still I can appreciate the memories it brings back. That early 90s, late 80s horror movie, watching, feeling. And the next is another sort of mockumentary movie. It's called Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon from 2006. And that replaces Alone in the Dark. I love this movie. And I read about it and watched previews for it and everything. And just, it would never come out. And then finally it was available somewhere on cable, and I watched it. And I just love it. It's Robert Englund is in it for a little bit, and Herschel from The Walking Dead is also in it, and his character is great in it. But I really, really like this movie a lot. I know the mockumentary, like, kind of subgenre is kind of frowned upon by a lot of people, a lot of horror fans, but I like it a lot. And it had some funny moments that, like, there's one part where he's like kickboxing, like getting exercise and stuff, and the girl making the documentary about him is kind of talking to him like, you know, why are you doing this or whatever. And he said, well, you know, you have to be really in shape to do this type of thing, because he's wants to be a serial killer, or he is, I don't know if he is a serial killer, but I don't remember if he is one yet or if he's working on it. He's training for it. But he's like, you won't believe the amount of cardio you have to do to keep in shape, because you have to look like you're walking while everyone else is running their asses off. I always thought that was funny. That always stuck with me. No one else understands why it's funny because they don't get it. But I thought it was funny. And also, what else was I going to say? See, I forget everything. That's why I take notes, and I should have taken more notes on The Rise of Leslie Vernon. But and also, I remember what it was. In The Rise of Leslie Vernon, they speak as if Leatherface, Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, and Jason are all part of the same universe. Now, if we take Freddy versus Jason, then we assume Freddy and Jason are part of the same universe, but we don't know about the other guys. But in this, they're like, well, you know, we had to go down to Texas to help our friend with that thing. And then they were mentioning something else about, well, you know, with Freddy and Mike and Jay, you know. So it's, you know, you really got to pay attention to the dialogue, especially when Leslie Vernon and Scott Wilson are talking about being slasher killers. Okay, so next we have number 4, and that is, this movie is so great. Low budget, but it is great. Hell House LLC came out a couple years ago. Now there is also a Hell House 2 and 3, and I love it all. They're getting ready to put out another movie, the Abaddon tapes. And it replaces Night of the Hunter on my list. But I really think Hell House really deserves to be higher on the list, but the other 3 movies above it deserve the places too. So anyway, so we'll just have to live with where it's at. But Hell House LLC is such a great movie. I love it so much. I did a makeup video where I do one of the clowns in it. But it's this group of haunters. They normally do a haunt, Hell House LLC, out of New York City. But then the big guy, the owner or whatever, decides to rent or purchase this place in Abaddon. And why he does that is explained throughout the 3 movies. And it's this hotel where many years ago the owner hung himself after rumors of, you know, evil stuff had been spread about. But it is on Amazon right now, I believe. And if you have the opportunity, watch the director's cut and then watch the original cut. That is my recommended order. And it's so good. Also found footage. I love my found footage, but it really is excellent. Even Eric likes it. It's really good. And I literally, when I first saw it, I just watched it over and over and over again. Because I was on Amazon Prime. I was trying to find something to watch. And I'm like, good. And I would start a movie and it looked, you know, it had this great synopsis. So I would start it and it just looked like it was filmed on some 14-year-old's cell phone. And not that 14-year-olds can't make good films, but it just, you know, it was terrible. And then another one, and that one's terrible, and another one, and then I'm like, ugh. So I get to this Hell House LLC, and I'm like, okay, we'll try this. Let's see what they got for me. And then I was like, what? Yes, thank you. Love it. I love Hell House LLC, and it is truly scary, like creepy, very creepy, super creepy. Okay, next on my list is Prince of Darkness from 1987. That replaces The Beast Within. You know, I talked about that earlier in an earlier video. But Prince of Darkness, Donald Pleasence is in it. Alice Cooper is in it also. And, you know, a bunch of other people. But it's just, visually, it's so 80s. I know it came out in 1987. But it's so, like, 80s horror. It's... For some reason, these scientists are investigating some paranormal activity or something. And only in the movies. I have yet to find a college classroom where I can sit in and learn about paranormal activity or urban legends or all this stuff that is, you know, great stuff professors talk about in horror movies. They never talk about them in real life. But yeah, so yeah, that's Prince of Darkness. And I think that's a really good movie. And there's some mirror stuff in it. And mirrors used to really freak me out. I'm over it, but there is some mirror stuff in it. And the way it ends, in my opinion, is just such a hopeless ending. You know, oh man, that stinks. So, you know. And in my number 2 spot, this movie is weird. It's kind of an anthology, but it's just weird. It's bizarre storytelling. It's from 1984. It replaces Pumpkinhead on my list, and that is The Company of Wolves. I think I love that movie because of the the Little Red Riding Hood aspect. I love Little Red Riding Hood lore. And there's so many different takes of the Little Red Riding Hood story. I'm thinking about doing a video one day because I could make a whole video on Little Red Riding Hood, original tellings of the story. Because when Little Red Riding Hood was first developed, look, I'm just gonna get into it a little bit. You know, back in the day when they started telling stories like the Grimm fairy tales, no one could write unless you were very wealthy, and even only men mainly were taught to write. But like the people, they told stories to, and there was no such thing as childhood. So the children were told the same stories, like childhood as we know it today. So young people were told the same stories as adult people. So there was no censorship really. So the original telling of Little Red Riding Hood is gruesome. The original telling of The Little Mermaid is horrific. It's fascinating. If you ever are interested in that, I strongly suggest researching children's stories before print, or origins of children's stories, or just break it down. Origins of, I don't think anybody has to look up the origin of Alice in Wonderland. I think we all kind of know that, and we know that's disturbing, but the Alice, or why do I keep saying Alice? The Little Red Riding Hood, to me, is probably the most disturbing. Yeah. Okay, so anyway, so The Company of Wolves is kind of a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood with the different mix of things in it. It's kind of an anthology because there's different stories going on, but it sort of all comes together at the end. But I just think it's a mystical movie. It's beautifully done. The sceneries and everything, and it's scary. But yeah, I think The Company of Wolves, if you haven't seen it, and you're into Little Red Riding Hood and werewolves and wolf type, Stephen Rea is in it from the Crying Game, and he was in Interview with a Vampire, which is also one of my favorite movies. But it's a really great, I can't even build it up enough. I'm gonna see if I can find it and watch it again. It's just, and it's one of those movies that if we would rent it, it was one of those movies I'd rent over and over and over again. And I would rent it And I would watch it at bedtime, so I'd fall asleep watching it, and then I'd wake up and something weird would be happening, and I'm like, am I dreaming this or am I seeing this for real? It's just triggers those memories of laying in bed and watching scary movies by myself, which was one of my favorite things to do and still is one of my favorite things to do, but I'm not allowed to have a TV in the bedroom because I won't get solid sleep like I'm supposed to. But that's a whole other story. Number one is, this is my favorite movie, or on this list, and the reason is, and it's probably one of my favorite horror movies, definitely, probably in my top 5. I'll have to research that a little bit, research my own brain, but this is definitely my favorite movie on this list because it's number 1. Came out in 1979, but I saw it when I was about 13 years old, and I was, of all things, babysitting when I saw this movie. The kids were in bed, turned the TV on, I'm chilling out. When a Stranger Calls. And that replaces Black Christmas in that position on my list. I watched When a Stranger Calls for the first time while I was babysitting. And these people lived in a house that was, it was in a neighborhood, but it was a particularly dark section of the neighborhood. And their house was just really scary. It was creaky. It was really a mess. It was like I don't know, their house was like a disaster. It was worse than my house, but it was just, that movie, even today, is, I watch it like this. And yeah, that's a scary movie. And I mean, I think it is. And also, I want to add that I don't think When a Stranger Calls is necessarily a lesser known movie, but I really wanted it on this list, and it was on Shot Till You Drop's list. So, but they had it in 49, and I'm like, you know what? I'm sorry, buddy. When a Stranger Calls deserves to be ahead of every single one of the movies on their list. It's Carol Kane. Yeah, so. But yeah, When a Stranger Calls is my number 1 pick. Even though the premise was a little tiny bit of a ripoff off of Black Christmas, which is the movie it replaces the position of on my list. So that's it for my list. Stay tuned for the next video in the series, which will be the last, where I discuss the movies. I name the movies that I didn't include, and I discuss them if they require any discussion. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you're enjoying this series. If y'all like this, I can do more series and use more categories. Fair warning, I pretty much watch exclusively horror movies, so that may be the only area where I have like super duper knowledge in. I mean, I watch other movies, but mostly my movie knowledge is horror. So, but that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to all of you in the next video. Bye!